Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Making SAM Tools Work, Insights from IT Support. Today, Mark Feinman will be presenting. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat and somebody will get to you. We also have a Q&A function available as well. At the end of the webinar, we will have questions and answers. So Mark will be able to respond to all of your burning questions. So go ahead, Mark, take it away.
All right, Lori, thank you. Welcome everyone from wherever you're watching and listening. Appreciate your time today. This is Making Software Asset Management Tools Work, Insights from IT Support. I'm Mark Feinman, and over the next hour or so, we'll talk a little bit about me. We'll go into the fact that our views of information technology are quite different. At a general level, we'll talk about how software asset management tools work and what types of skills and tools are necessary to effectively support them. We'll then compare the maintenance cycle of a SAM tool to that of your automobile. Discuss why maintenance isn't always enough. Sometimes enhancement is necessary. And I'll offer some tips and techniques regarding optimizing and collaborating with your SAM tool, and we'll wrap things up with key takeaways. So a little bit about me. I am a senior IT asset management specialist with over 15 years experience with those types of tools and technologies. I've been in IT more years than I'm willing to count. My focus on ITAM tools is installation, configuration, administration, monitoring. Couldn't figure out a word monitoring that ended in shun, and programming. So you can kind of guess already that this is not going to be a typical discussion of licensing, because I don't focus on licensing. I'm the team that basically makes sure your tool is working properly. When not at work, I play volleyball. I enjoy bicycling, and I have a model subway system in my family room. I also enjoy playing pinball, and my Spotify playlist is typically with jam and oldies from the 1980s. So our views of information technology are quite different. Your view is typically whatever the pixels are showing you. It's based on whatever you're selecting from whatever tool you're looking at. My view is very different. My view is basically the individual components that makes sure that your tool is working properly. Don't try to squint and read the picture on the right. You'll just hurt your eyes. It's really just to illustrate complexity. So let's go back to the 1980s. Back in the 1980s, especially in 1989, this little application called Lotus Notes was developed. And it was basically the first email program that ran on PCs. It did a lot more than that, but that's generally what it was really well known for. And your view was basically the cryptic graphics that were displayed to you on your older IBM PCs. My view of notes in 1989 is how the clients are talking to the server. My view looks at whether or not the server is working. Are the clients talking properly? Are the clients available? Is there connectivity? That's what my view tended to look like. So things were much easier in the 1980s. A single server pretty much handled everything, regardless of the type of product you deployed. You deployed it once and you were pretty much done. So if you remember Prego spaghetti sauce, its tagline was, "It's in there." Well, deploying notes in the 1980s was very similar. You deployed the server and everything I needed was just in there. I didn't have to worry about it. Maintenance was much simpler. Again, I had one server to manage and several clients, and the client connectivity was, for the most part, pretty straightforward. Fewer skills were necessary to support notes. I basically just really had to understand notes, a little bit about networking, and that was it. Licensing was simpler. There were really only two variants of software licensing at the time. You were either a client or you were a server, and that's it. And in fact, this whole concept of IT asset management and software asset management didn't really get going until about 2002. Scalability was very difficult, though. If you had one server that you deployed that did everything, what happens when that server reached its capacity? How did you go beyond the capacity of that particular server provided? That was not easy to do. So today, your view is still what the pixels are showing you based on what you're selecting in your tool. The graphics, though, are much, much better than they were in the 1980s. My view has gotten even more complex. The next three slides were pulled right out of documentation from different vendors. Uh, don't worry about understanding the entire picture. But basically, if your company uses BigFix or BigFix Inventory as its SAM tool, you had clients that talk to collection servers that talk to a master server managed by a console that received updates from the internet. If you use Snow Inventory Server, the concepts are pretty similar. You had clients that talked to what they called service gateways that talked to a master server and stored its information in a database. And if you use Flexera's FlexNet Manager Suite, I chose a different slide for this, again, to emphasize complexity. If you were to open the hood of Flexera Manager Suite's main server, you would have all these functions that are talking to each other and running. And the fact that there are lots of arrows pointing in various directions kind of illustrates that complexity. So today, support for SAM tools is more complex than ever. If you deployed one server and one jar of Prego spaghetti sauce in the 1980s, you'd have to go to Costco and get yourself a case of Prego in order to support your servers today. There are many servers that are deployed to make tools work. One handles the user interface. One handles the database and managing the data in that database. One handles collection and processing of inventory. One handles importing of data that gets the whole process started. And there are other servers that have other roles as well. And just the fact that I have a larger number of servers means I have higher maintenance costs if I completely ignore the software and the licensing thereof. Just the fact that I have more servers makes it more expensive. I now need specialized skills in order to support the tool. I need to understand how a database works. I may need to understand how to back it up. I may need to understand how to write queries to get data out of a database. I may need to understand networking. Licensing is a lot more complicated. If you are a licensed analyst listening to this, I don't have to tell you how many metrics there are nowadays and how things continue to evolve. Scalability, though, got much easier because of all of the modern infrastructure techniques that are available to support growth of applications. So from a big picture, most SAM tools work the same way. Starting from the bottom up, there are agents that are typically deployed on all your devices whose main job is to figure out what software is installed on your devices. In some cases, the agent also answers the question, what kind of a computer am I? What are my characteristics? How much RAM do I have? What is my CPU size? The agents, on a periodic basis, will upload their information to a series of data transmission servers. And the job of these data transmission servers is to simply collect all of the data coming in from the clients and package it in a more useful fashion to upload that data to a centralized data processing server. The centralized data processing server will periodically apply what I call its magic sauce to determine your licensing position. The process compares what you have, the inventory collected, with what you're entitled to, your contracts, your purchase orders, etc. And the result of that comparison is your licensing position. And those results at the very top of the diagram, those results are displayed to you in some kind of web-based interface. Now, there's a small graphic that looks like a garbage can with the universal symbol of a pharmacy. I used a product called Draw.io to create this diagram. That is their symbol for a database. Don't shoot the messenger. So if we look at the specific tools now regarding how the tools work using the same diagram, the agents are typically, for example, HCL's Big Fix client. Flexera calls their agent the FlexNet inventory agent. Snow Software calls their agent the Snow inventory agent. It'll be interesting to see what happens over time as Flexera basically recently acquired Snow. The data collection servers, HCL calls theirs the Big Fix Relay. Flexera calls theirs the Flexera Inventory Beacon, and Snow calls their server the Snow Service Gateway. Different names for similar functionality. The server that applies the magic sauce, HCL calls theirs Big Fix Inventory. It's also partly known as the Big Fix platform because Big Fix Inventory runs on what's called the Big Fix platform. Flexera calls their server the FlexNet Manager Suite, and Snow calls their server the Snow Inventory Server. And the interface displayed to you in a web browser is typically done through Chrome, Safari, or Microsoft's set of browsers. Regardless of what tool you're using, with all of these servers feeding other servers and creating the end result, it's still up to the license analyst to take a look at that result and determine if it's accurate and make the appropriate changes. All right, so we looked at a high level and talked about how the servers generally work. Let's talk a little bit about the skills that are necessary to support those skills. Those servers, sorry. In the 1980s, troubleshooting was basically at the hardware level. We had to deal with Ethernet networks that were started in 1983. IBM had their token ring network that started in 1985 as a competitor to Ethernet. And Ethernet ended up winning out. Token ring pretty much disappeared by the late 90s. Most things in the 80s were still mainframe based, so you had SNA, Systems Network Architecture, on the mainframe that started in 1974. The operating systems you typically supported in the 80s, Microsoft's Disk Operating System, DOS, started in 1981. Windows, as we all know, it started in 1985. OS2, Operating System 2, started in 1987. AIX, Armani Exchange, basically started in 1980. That's not Armani Exchange. I'm not sure who stuck that in the teleprompter. AIX is Advanced Interactive Executive. It was an IBM operating system that started in 1986. Mainframe operating systems, MVS, Multiple Virtual Storage, started in 1974. Virtual Machine 370 back in 72, and Application System 400 in 1988. This is a little IBM centric because I used to work for IBM way back in the day. Programming and scripting languages were typically on the mainframe. I'm surprised REX wasn't called T-REX at the time, but it wasn't. REX stands for Restructured Extended Executor. CLIS command lists, which ran on the MVS side of the house. COBOL, Common Business-Oriented Language for most business applications, still in use today. And in the scientific realm, Fortran, formula translation, was another major programming language. They all were developed in a command line environment. It was typically called green screen back in the day. And that's where scripting was basically performed to automate things. In general, there was very little PC-based software. Mainframe access was primary. It really wasn't until the late 1980s where Lotus 123 was invented and really became the killer app that got PCs going. So today in 2025, the operating system most typically dealt with are Windows and some flavor of Linux. Believe it or not, we're still dealing with the command line. So instead of green screen, now it's kind of a black background with white lettering. But that's what's common between the operating systems for entering commands. And if you're supporting a SAM tool, you need to be familiar with the operating system of whatever devices are being scanned. Because if for some reason the scans stop running, or some other issue occurs with the device, you need to know the commands to get to the logs to be able to determine what's going on or what's not going on. Troubleshooting, you're still doing some network troubleshooting, but you're doing it more at the software level than you are at the actual wiring. You would typically be writing a lot of database queries in order to get information that might be necessary that the user interface of your tool does not show you. You're also writing queries to get data involved in troubleshooting, especially if you're working with a vendor on some kind of trouble ticket. Integration and customization, we're still writing scripts. The languages are different though. Now you're probably using Python or PowerShell or Bash scripts if you're in the Linux environment. We're still trying to automate things as best we can. What's really different, though, in 2025 that wasn't so prevalent back in the 80s is the fact that the IT folks now really need to be better at talking to customers in their language, avoiding the technobabble. So when issues occur, you can clearly identify what's going on and what the estimate is for recovery. You might also be asked to help analyze how things are working in a particular SAM tool to come up with some new requirement for that SAM tool's vendor that's currently not being met. So SAM support is not just technical, it also requires, troubleshooting and business skills now. So here are some tools that I use to troubleshoot and manage the SAM tools that I support. This is not exhaustive. This is just a representative sample. Ping is asking the question, are you there? Netstat basically answers the question, what computers are connected to me and what computers am I connected to? Traceroute and test net connection. If you remember the acronym for old telephones, it was called POTS, Plain Old Telephone Service. When you make a phone call, your call gets routed from you to whoever you're calling, and you really don't care how that routing is occurring. Well, if for some reason you get the dreaded message, your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please try your call again later. You are going to care about how your call is routed because something's blocking that transmission. So the commands traceroute and testnet connection are used to figure out where that blockage might be. There are service and system commands that are executed to start and stop your SAM tool. These are just generic examples. For network configuration, the ipconfig command on Windows and the if command in Linux, they both ask the same question. Tell me about yourself from a networking standpoint. The internet and computers, they don't talk to each other using addressing like google.com. They use addressing like 1.2.3.4. But there are servers that know how to translate google.com to 1.2.3.4. And ipconfig and ifconfig can be used to help identify what those computers are to determine if they're functioning properly. Database queries, that's really dependent on the type of tool you're using and what table you're going against. Basically, you're writing some variant of T-SQL, which is the Microsoft version of structured query language. That's what SQL stands for. You're using, some language for commands such as Bash and Linux, PowerShell, Python, and maybe you're using the old-fashioned batch file that was invented back in the DOS days. To look at logs, You're using commands to basically look at files. Some examples are more or less in cat. Those are commands in Linux to look at files in chunks, either forwards or backwards. Type is the equivalent command in Windows. Tail allows you to look at a log file live as it's running, which I tend to find very useful when I'm trying to debug something, live. Some agencies use tools to centralize the logs. One of the agencies that I support in the US government uses a tool called Splunk. It's basically a data aggregator. It knows how to take certain files, put them in a central place, and then I could query that central place to look at logs. So it's great for someone like me because I don't have access to the 40,000 devices that might be deployed. But this gives me access to all the logs on all the devices without having to actually hit any of those devices. Okay, so let's compare the maintenance life cycle of your SAM tool to that of an automobile. So why might you perform basic maintenance on your DeLorean? Well, if you don't make sure that your flux capacitor is running at 88 gigawatts, you're not doing any time travel. What are the things that you might do for basic maintenance? Check the oil, rotate the tires, check the fluids. Basically, things that don't require downtime of your car or a minimal amount of downtime for your car. Why would you do basic maintenance on your SAM tool? Well, you want to keep it running. You check how busy your central processing unit is. How full is your disk? A full disk in a database server is not a good thing. You check memory. You may have to apply patches, and you probably have to apply database backup procedures every once in a while. Those typically don't require that your tool be down. Why would you perform scheduled maintenance on Kit? Well, you want to make sure that the device used to talk to Kit continues to work. It's pretty amazing that, back in the 80s, the TV series Knight Rider had a talking car called Kit. And here we are in 2025 using Siri or Alexa to talk to our cars. Who would have thunk it? But why perform scheduled maintenance at all? Well, you want to replace parts before they are expected to fail. You probably flush out your transmission. You changed your brake pads and smoothen out your rotors because cars have to stop. You check the spark plugs and replace them at certain intervals. You make sure that your antifreeze is in good working order, as well as your battery, because on those really cold days, you want your car to start. Why would you perform scheduled maintenance on a SAM tool? You want to basically prevent and resolve defects. In some cases, you want to be proactive about it if your SAM tool vendor comes out with a patch. What are some of the scheduled maintenance tasks that you might perform? You perform patches to the tool as well as the operating system. There may be database maintenance that needs to be applied. There's this concept called update statistics that databases have. These statistics are used when queries are run to help them run faster, and they occasionally need to be regenerated. That's one thing that you would do as part of your database maintenance to keep your tool running well. You probably do a full server backup on occasion. You will probably upgrade your tool from one minor version to another. And the same may be true of your operating system, especially applying monthly um, Microsoft patches. Why do you perform unscheduled maintenance? Well, things break. You don't want your A-Team van to not run. You want it to hum like a Z28. You basically want to fix the issues as they occur. What are some things that might happen? Your car stalls or it won't start. It has some kind of a leak, and maybe it overheated. Maybe the air conditioning is blowing hot air, and the intermittent issues, which I despise incredibly. The case where your car squeaks and you bring it in for service and it stops squeaking. Why perform unscheduled maintenance on your SAM tool? Well, again, you want to fix issues as they occur. You want your SAM tool to perform what it's supposed to perform. What are some things that might happen? Perhaps the agent server connection on a particular device got interrupted, or the agent itself stopped running. Maybe the tool itself has a memory leak. Maybe the tool crashes at certain points and requires some kind of hotfix from the vendor to remedy. At some point, you may have to consider replacing your car. Why? Well, maybe that you had a catastrophic failure, the transmission or the engine. Typically, when the repair cost exceeds the car's value, that's probably time to get rid of it. There are other reasons as well. Maybe you just outgrown it. You've had it for a while and you're done with it, and you want the latest bells and whistles that new cars offer. When would you consider replacing your SAM tool? Again, catastrophic failure is certainly one reason. The vendor saying we're not supporting it anymore is certainly another. You may have also simply outgrown it. Um, Perhaps you started out with your tool monitoring 20,000 devices, and over time it's looking at 50,000 devices, and the tool is not really keeping up with that very well. A pretty typical reason for replacing a tool is when one company acquires another, and both companies have different SAM tools, and the acquiring company wants the acquired company to use their tool. So you have to migrate everybody in the acquired company to the new tool. So some best practices that I've witnessed over time, don't defer maintenance. Small issues certainly can become big problems. As a train guy, I have to interject this one in. The New York City Transit Authority, that little agency that runs that little subway system in New York City, back in February of 1981, they had about 5,000 subway cars in their fleet. Only about 1,200 of them were available for service on a cold February day because all of the others had some kind of a defect preventing them from running. So you can bet that there were a lot of unhappy people waiting on platforms for trains that never came, or for trains that were much shorter than normal, making them very crowded. It took years for the Transit Authority to recover. So don't be the New York City Transit Authority in the 80s. Don't defer your maintenance. You would absolutely, in my opinion, document everything that you do to your SAM tool. It helps, especially if some issue might occur that you didn't expect. You can go back to your documentation on what you've done and say, well, what did I do recently that might have contributed to the SAM tool not working properly? You can easily keep track of what's been done. Think of it like an oil change log. You change the oil every 5,000 miles, and hopefully you're keeping track of it somewhere. Standard operating procedures are invaluable for infrequent tasks. When I started support for a particular agency of the US government, my predecessor left on Friday. I started on a Monday. I started blind. I had nothing to look at, no documentation of any kind whatsoever. Over the few years that I've been supporting this agency, I've created a standard operating procedure document for everything that I do. It will become essential when someone else takes over this role. It's actually very useful when I need to perform tasks that I don't perform often. An example would be replacing a certificate that basically vouches for you in the browser and says, this server is who it really says it is. It's called an SSL certificate, and it's typically replaced once a year. I've documented that procedure. So every time I have to do it, I don't have to worry about forgetting it or remembering it. I can just turn to the page in my standard operating procedure document and off I go. So I've done that with just about everything else regarding support of their SAM tool, and it's performed with great benefit. And that kind of segues into having a well-trained staff. I am a big proponent of training. It's very, especially in IT, when things seem to change hourly, very important to keep up to date. And if you remember the outage last year because of a CrowdStrike misconfigured file, I'll bet that probably could have been avoided had there been some training. Now, clearly, maintenance is a big job of what I do in support of SAM tools, but it isn't the whole story. There are times when your SAM tool might not do something you suddenly need it to do. And if you approach the SAM vendor, they may not be willing to make that change immediately. It may be in a future release, but you don't want to wait for that future release. You kind of want that done now. So your IT support team can get involved to help meet that requirement. And I'm going to go through three short use cases where I've actually done just that for various customers. We'll look at disabling inactive users. We'll look at tracking the last login user for a Mac, and we'll look at mapping a computer to a certain division in the company. So the first requirement I had was to disable users who haven't logged into their SAM tool in 30 or more days. The agency I support feels that inactive accounts or inactive users that have active accounts is a security exposure. And the way to help close security exposures is to disable those accounts if they're not being used. So in this case, the SAM tool involved was FlexNet Manager Suite, the on-premises version. And in order to meet this requirement, I took a look at the FNMS database and determined that the last login date is maintained even if the user interface does not expose it. The vendor Flexera has a great published schema available. A schema is basically a mapping of all of the tables and the fields in those tables of a particular database. So the documentation was really good, and I had access to the backend database because this tool was installed on premises. So basically, if I have the last login date, I can compare it to today's login date, to today's date, and if that threshold is greater than 30 days, I can disable the user. So the solution to this was creating a stored procedure which did exactly that. It runs once a week, and basically, if it finds that you have not logged in within 30 days, it disables you. This solution, however, would not be possible if you're using the cloud version of Flexera called Flexera 1 ITAM, because when you're using the cloud version, you've given up access to the Flexera backend database, and you would need to rely on Flexera support for a remedy. For the last login user, again, it was FlexNet Manager Suite on premises. The requirement was show me the last login user on a Mac. You're showing it to me on Windows. Why aren't you showing it to me on a Mac? When I went through analyzing this issue, I determined that the field was populated inside the database, but it wasn't shown in the user interface. Why? Because Flexera expected the format of that user ID to be in a particular way. On the Macs, that format was not considered proper. So when Flexera attempted to do a lookup on that user to display that information, it basically came back empty. Therefore, Flexera displayed an empty field. I was, however, able to determine that there was data in the field, even though the UI didn't show it to you. And Flexera supports a concept of user-defined fields, so I could create my own field with its own value, and using a certain protocol, I can display that field in the user interface. So that's the approach I took. I created a user-defined field for the logged-in user, and again, a stored procedure to take that hidden value to display it in the same format that Flexera did if I was able to reformat it. But if I couldn't do that, I would just display whatever was there. So I was able to expose that value regardless of what it looked like. And then finally, the third requirement was, given a device, identify the company division that it belonged to. The tool that I supported at the time was the IBM licensed metric tool. When I went through this requirement, the IBM licensed metric tool uses the BigFix platform to make it work. And the BigFix platform allows for the creation of computer properties. And the term computer properties is BigFix lingo for Flexera's user-defined field. It's the same concept. I had the source data available to me that listed all the devices and the division that they were found in, and this was obtained outside of ILMT. Basically, I was provided a set of files that had all of the devices, and if your device was found in a particular file, that file represented a particular division, so I was able to assign a division name based on the presence in a file. So to solve this issue, I basically used what's called ActionScript. ActionScript is a scripting language within BigFix that allows you to automate certain things. And I used ActionScript to download the series of source files to every computer when necessary. It created a script either for Windows or Linux on the fly. So I used automation to create more automation. It launched the script to determine the division. It created a property for the device. So it would say like, device X is in the systems technology division. And then when it was done, it cleaned up after itself as if it was never there. And then within BigFix, a task was created to launch this action script on all devices. So here are some different ways to help improve your collaboration with your SAM tool to help better your outcomes, whatever they may be. The first one would be to make the data accessible. As an IT support person, the fact that all the logs can be available to me from all devices is invaluable, and it can be done without me having access to the actual devices. You could use a similar type of approach for your data. If you want to share some of your data, but not all of it, and you don't want to grant access to your tool, you could use a data aggregation tool like Splunk to import the data that you want to make available and then grant access to that. In my opinion, being able to get security or your security organization aligned with your SAM tool is a big win, because security is always looking for outdated or prohibited software, and you using a SAM tool have the means to come up with that list. So help getting security on your side is a big win when it comes to the deployment of SAM tools. You can also use your tool to reduce the unnecessary software. Clearly, reducing the amount of licenses you have on any tool will save you money. And software that is no longer being supported is a big cybersecurity risk, and you want to eliminate that as well. For the deployment of my agents in Flexera, I actually didn't do the agent deployment. I had to create the agent package that got deployed, and there were various teams that performed the deployment, especially on the Linux side. So I created a wiki that was used to explain what the agent is, what it does, how to deploy it, instructions to automate it, etc. I would encourage similar type of centralized documentation for similar types of tasks. And when it comes to translating your metrics, yeah, it sounds great to say I saved 1 million processor value units, but I'll bet half the people listening to this presentation don't know what a PVU is. But if you say, well, I saved $3 million by saving those million PVUs, most people understand the value of $1. So wherever possible, translate your savings into metrics that your audience will better understand. I'm a big proponent on training, getting to the top of the Maslow pyramid would be the creation of a center of competency that's available as people come in and out of this role. It would be great to have one. It's difficult to get there, but that's definitely a goal worth looking at. And when it comes to support of a SAM tool, as I said earlier, it's not just technical skills nowadays. There are business skills that need to be applied to better get ideas across. And I'm sure you've heard this many times. Make sure you have executive buy-in when you're deploying a SAM tool and a SAM process. But it's just as important to maintain that buy-in over time, because if you don't do that, you're going to end up with this horror show that a particular company had that I will now share with you. You might know of Nakatomi Technologies. They had a catastrophic incident when a helicopter crashed into their building several years ago. They knew that IBM was going to audit them. And as most license analysts know, one of the requirements for using subcapacity licensing is to deploy the IBM license metric tool. They didn't do that. So they haphazardly deployed it, but they didn't keep track of decisions made when things were deployed, and they didn't really assemble a team of people to deploy it properly. And there was no documentation, and there was no clear ownership. So the tool ended up shrinking, people went to other tasks, and the tool was not maintained. So what happened? Well, they got audited. ILMT was severely outdated. There were errors everywhere. They basically paid for both the errors and the fact that they really weren't using subcapacity licensing. Um, when tools are deployed, you really should record the decisions made upon deployment, because you need to understand those decisions when things happen, or to understand why the tool might be working the way it is. It could be traced back to a decision made way back when the tool was deployed. The fact that the tool was not supported cost Nakatomi a lot of money. In the case of ILMT, in order for subcapacity licensing to be useful, it needs to be able to reach out to your technology that's used for virtualization. If it can't do that, it makes certain assumptions, and they're always on the high side. So instead of maybe a computer being worth 70 processor value units, it says a computer was worth 200 processor value units, and the fact that the 200 is greater than 70 is going to cost you more. The IBM license metric tool will default to higher values. So you really want to make sure that it's working properly. Obviously, they didn't maintain the tool. That in itself is a compliance risk. IBM requires you to be within 7 versions of the current version. And if not, there are penalties that could come into effect if you're that far behind. So ownership really needs to be assigned and maintained. Records need to be kept of what's been done, and you need to have a team that updates the tool and provides its proper care and feeding. So don't be Nakatomi Technologies. Make sure you have executive sponsorship. Make sure the teams are properly assembled. Remember the goals that you're trying to achieve with the deployment of the tool, whether it's saving money, discovering the software in your environment, being ready for an audit, all three, whatever the goals are, you have to keep those in mind. And be sure to occasionally communicate the benefits of IT asset management, specifically how much money could be saved, and improving cybersecurity posture, and eliminating software you're not really using in your environment. So I got a couple of slides here on from looking at making your SAM tool better from a performance standpoint. The first one being reducing technical debt. Old is typically not better. In the IT world, old is really not good. You really want to make sure that whatever tool you're using is fairly up to date, and you want to get rid of things that are not being used anymore. In order to help your database hum along properly, be sure not to overload it. An example might be scheduling the reconciliation of your entitlements to your actual inventory at a time when people are running reports for management purposes. That will just bog the database down and everything will run really slowly. And it's typically no secret when these database processes work. They're known, you can find out about them and schedule your own queries at other times. Dashboards these days and the analytics that the tools are coming out with are getting better with each release. Get to know them really well. It remains to be seen what will happen in the future with artificial intelligence getting involved with the reporting capability. And finally, automate and whatever is possible, and make sure that those connections are up and running properly when you need them. So to defeat that final critter, and you don't just do this once, you do this periodically. Um, every once in a while, take a step back and determine, is my SAM tool doing what it's supposed to? Are there any gaps in what I think I'd like it to do now and in the future? If there's something that it's lacking in, maybe that's the time to talk to your tool vendor and find out if your requirement is in a future release. And if not, maybe get your IT support people involved to code something. Get to know your analytics and reporting. Again, the reporting tools are getting really smart. They're much better than they were even a year ago. Change attitudes about software asset management. We're not just counting beans. We are making improved and strategic decisions to help determine what's in our environment and to basically get rid of things that really shouldn't be in our environment. So if you remember nothing else from this discussion, remember that AIX is not our money exchange. And also remember that your tools are only as good as your strategy. If you don't have the people and strategy behind your tool, what good is deploying the tool at all? Collaboration is key, especially I feel, with your security organization. You get them on your side, and you can work wonders with SAM tools. It becomes way more than just counting licenses. And that segues into making SAM a business enabler. Use your tool to make better decisions and for cost savings. Again, I'm a big proponent in training. So we invest in tools, we invest in their upgrades, we invest in their support, invest in your people, invest in your processes. Make sure there's adequate training, documentation, and clear workflows to keep your SAM process effective over time. And again, optimization is not a one-time thing. You want to periodically step back and basically ask the question, how am I doing, as Ed Koch used to say in the 1980s. So to wrap things up, we talked a little bit about me, the fact that my view of IT and your view of IT is vastly different. At a high level, we talked about how SAM tools work, and I gave examples of specific tooling names. We talked about the skills and tools that are used for effective support. I gave examples in a list that was not exhaustive. We compared the maintenance cycle of your tool to that of an automobile, and I offered best practices in that maintenance. We discussed that maintenance is usually not enough, that there is some enhancement required, and how your IT support folks can help with that. I gave 3 short use cases on things that were done to enhance tools. I offered some good practices regarding optimizing your tool and collaborating with other teams. And only a couple minutes ago, summarized the key takeaways. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time this time until next time, and I'll open up the floor for questions. So Lori, do what you do to open the floor.
Thanks, Mark. Great job. Right now, we don't have any questions in the chat. So if anybody has any questions, please drop them in the chat. If not, then you can always contact Mark or SIE for any questions, concerns, anything. Paul would like a copy of the deck. Absolutely, you may get a copy. We will send it to everybody once this concludes. Are there any additional questions or concerns?
The test is next Tuesday.
Uh-oh. Alrighty, it doesn't look like we have any other questions and nobody's typing in the chat. We are here for you if you do. So please reach out to us. We will send you this deck. So thank you everybody for your time. And we will talk with you all shortly.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.